I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, welcome back again. What's up, world? I mix what I like live. I'm Jared Ball, back once again. Black Power Media. Welcome to everybody here live. Shout out and welcome to everybody who checks this out later in their replays. Very excited about our next conversation. And as soon as our guest gets here, we're going to jump right into it. So, but I'm going to, and we did just speak. And in fact, hold on one second. There might be a quick, hold on one second. We're going to get to him. All right. Apologies, everybody. But it looks like we are all getting there all set, and he'll be joining us here in just a moment. And that is, by the way, Frank Chapman, who is a community organizer, executive director of the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, field organizer of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and a member of the Central Committee of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. He is also a published writer with articles on Truthout and Freedomways. In 2019, Frank published his first book, a memoir entitled, I'm going to change that here to titled. Entitled is not the right, that's another pet peeve of mine. I'm sorry, y'all. That's terrible. It's so petty. Titled, "The Damned Don't Cry, Pages from the Life of a Black Prisoner and Organizer," where he's going to be joining us to talk about his most recent book, which I can't wait to get even more into, because it's I mean, oh my goodness. But Black Liberation and Socialism. So I can't wait for him to get here, and which should be any second. We just should be anyway. But in the interim, the book is amazing. And when he gets here, we're going to start off, since we've already done the introduction. I can't wait to get to this first round of questions, particularly about what he does to, from his perspective, reset the conversation about the Black radical tradition and where Cedric Robinson is situated, which I think for a lot of folks is particularly as Cedric Robinson gets justifiably renewed attention around racial capitalism and Robin Kelly. This will be a fascinating perspective and critique on that. And it looks like we have him here. Good morning to you, Frank Chapman. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you and meet you.
So sorry about the difficulty.
No, it's all good. It's well worth it. I've done the business by introducing you and getting everybody set for what it is we're going to talk about. So I'd like to just jump right in, if it's okay, because
jump right in.
Frankly, well, again, pun intended, I have a lot more to get to in the book, but I wanted to start off with where you do in resituating the Black radical tradition, Marxism, and Black Marxism by Cedric Robinson, which, again, as I was just saying before you got here, given a lot of the justified renewed attention that Robinson is getting via the talk of racial capitalism, and Robin Kelly's work, etc. I think what your critique here is very interesting. So I wanted to, if you would, to just start us off with what you were doing there, and then I think that lays out nicely what it is you're trying to do with the book.
Well, first of all, let me salute Robertson for the outstanding work he has done. I have great respect for him as a scholar, as an intellectual. And the only thing that I was doing was contrasting my perspective with his, so that given the title of the book, Black Liberation and Socialism, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, and as such, I don't subscribe to the notion of Black Marxism. Those who do, they do that by their choice. I choose not to. I think scientific socialism exists independent of race and nationality, just like chemistry, physics, and any other science. But having said all of that, his discussion is very interesting. And I pointed out my one major difference with it, and that is that that Marxism as a science is limited by its geography, by its culture, and first of all, let's don't get too carried away with that. Europe didn't develop science independent of the world, and neither did they develop their culture that way. Modern science in Europe would never have emerged had it not been for what was going on in North Africa with regard to the Islamic cultures, really developing the scientific culture. And, it affected their mathematical system, it affected their sociology, it affected everything that they do, their chemistry, And if you just check it out, Europe got a whole lot of what it calls its original stamp from other cultures and other people. So I'll just make that point,
If you don't mind, I'd like to add here, because you say here that you write here in the introduction, how does one even begin to understand Marx's materialist theory of history if one doesn't recognize that historical materialism came about as a result of Marx and Engels settling accounts with German ideology, French socialism, and English political economy? In fact, you say Robinson avoids dealing with the sources and Robinson avoids dealing with the sources and component parts of Marxism by simply declaring that Marxism is a Western construction. You quote him here saying a conceptualization of human affairs that emerged from European peoples, mediated in turn through their social orders and their cultures. Certainly the philosophical origins are indisputably Western, end quote. And then you continue, not really, you say. For what emerged in Europe during the so-called Renaissance was passed on to them by the Arabs and the Islamic culture dominant in North Africa and Spain, that is mediated through the non-Western cultures of North Africa and the Moors. European peoples did not develop their culture in isolation, but in fact drew much knowledge from the more advanced non-Western cultures of Africa and the East. So you directly challenge this notion that is still prevalent and hotly debated, that Marxism or socialism or scientific socialism is in fact a European or Eurocentric construct, which I think, again, particularly at this time, is a powerful intervention. So,
Well, I just think I'm citing historical facts, that's all.
Which some might argue in a time like this is a powerful intervention. So, I mean,
cool.
but again, because as someone who admires Robinson's work and has tried at least to understand it and incorporate it, your line here is challenging, but I think fascinating. So I definitely would, want to see if we can sort of keep going with that investigation, so to speak, because one of the other things that you tackle in your work here.
Can I just back you up for a second?
Oh, please, please go ahead.
The reason why I did that ideological clarification was because the methodology that I'm using is historical materialism. That and apparently, there's some issues with Robertson and his people with regard to that. I'm using the method of historical material because I think it's scientifically based. I think it's a sound method, and so that's all. I mean, that was the primary purpose of the clarification. And then in the very first chapter of the book, after we get out of the introduction, I lay out what the basic premises of historical materialism is.
And that's exactly what I was about to ask you. Could you summarize that? That's exactly where I was going to go. Could you summarize that? Because when you start to get into because when you start to get into the questions of coloniality, the color line of race versus nation, the Communist International, I think all of that requires at least some refresher on the historical material approach. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the historical materialist approach, it can be summed up in a few words, and that is that it is not the consciousness of people that determines their social being, but their social being that determines their consciousness. This just simply means that before people can have ideas or institutions or anything else, they must first survive as they have to eat, and they have to provide shelter for themselves and clothing and whatnot. And this material foundation of all human life requires us certain relationships between people. And so we say that first people produce things through tools and whatnot, and then what happens as a result of that, they form social relationships, language, ideas, all sorts of institutions is based on this fundamental material reality of people having to first sustain themselves, as physical beings. In that sense, they're no different than any other animal, but in the sense that they produce their own means of subsistence, they are different from other animals. Lions and tigers don't do that, human beings do, and so where other animals function by instinct, we function by social consciousness. So that's the point I make in the opening chapter.
So then, but then, could you say a little bit more about how this then leads you to different conclusions from someone like Robinson, or even in the way that the popular discussion of his work is carried today, that is through racial capitalist analysis?
Well, right there. Okay. Modern capitalism, the way that it emerged, through the African slave trade, international commerce, those were the material foundations upon which racism is based. Racism is a justification of the super exploitation of Black people, particularly Black labor. And prior to the modern era, you can go back through history and comb the books as much as you like. You're not going to find no white race. You're not going to find no Black race. People didn't identify themselves that way in ancient times. That's a modern invention. It's a sociological invention. There's no scientific biological basis for race. That's got to do with sociology and culture. And if we start out from the Marxist proposition that sociology and culture are nothing but a justification and rationalization of what the economic system is. If the economic system is based on oppression and exploitation, then the ideas that it generates is to justify that. And that's what racism does. It justifies the exploitation and oppression of Black people.
But again, but I guess I'm just asking but so I'm just thinking that, for instance, I'm thinking that in terms of, well, myself for one, but also in terms of, I don't know, so my students, for instance, or others who see central to so much of the discussion now, race, even as being primary. How in so, for instance, when Cedric Robinson reaches his conclusions about the cultural or the ethnocentric nature of Marxism, why is he missing something? Or when those who are saying today that race is the primary,
that's easy to say for me, but it might not be easy to say for you or others, because we might be coming from totally different positions philosophically. It's got to do with science, and it's got to do whether or not you believe in science. If you think that the world was here before the mind was here, we're okay. If you think the man was here before the world was here, we're not okay. If you think that consciousness is something other than conscious existence, we're not okay. Consciousness is nothing but conscious existence. So there's no idea that you got in your head right now, no idea that I got in my head right now, that didn't come from the conditions under which we were born into. It's social.
Okay, no, sure. It's
sociological. It's not instinctive. It's social. And so that's the argument that I make in the book, and that's the method I apply in approaching these questions. Because we're not fighting an idea in the brains of white people. We're fighting an objective criminal system of exploitation, and it's based on objective social relations that we see every day in our lives. We see it with black folks living in ghettos. We see it in unemployment rates. We see it all the time. And to say that all of this stuff exists because somebody has the wrong idea about us, to me, is the height of fantasy. That's not why it exists, because somebody is profiting and making money off of it. And I don't think we would disagree with that.
I'm not saying we disagree at all. I'm not even saying I fully understand anybody's argument. So I'm just trying to raise some questions. Yeah, that's all.
No problem.
Yeah, that's it. So that's it.
But I'm ready to discuss my book anytime.
Oh yeah. So well, that's it. So
Robinson.
No, but okay, right on.
Yeah, I talk about Robinson one time in the whole book, and that's in the introduction.
I got it, but I'm just saying,
and that's only for the purpose of clarification.
Right.
And I think we've gone through that clarification here, and that is that I'm coming from a different position. I believe that I believe in historical materialism.
All right. So when you do talk about also the role of the Communist International and the Black communities or Black relationship to that entity, and then engage this question of the Communist International first and second, I believe, and their different opinions on the issue of race and nationhood. And then later in the book, you talk about the color line versus the colonial problem. So could you talk a little bit about first what was the Communist International, and then what was this debate between the race and national question, and how did everybody conclude?
Right. Well, the first international was created by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, or grew out of the movement that they were a part of. Had a fundamental understanding about the question of race that a lot of people who think they're Marxists and a lot of people who study Marxism totally miss. And that is that, like the final lines of the Communist Manifesto is, workers of the world unite. Well, by workers of the world, they didn't just mean white workers. And a lot of people don't even address the fact that they didn't just mean white workers. Particularly a lot of a lot of socialists that came after them. They meant that if workers in a black skin were being sold and branded, that workers in a white skin could never be free. So they saw the precondition for the self-emancipation of the working class being also the liberation of slaves. He said it in Capital, in his major work. He mentioned it in other places in his critique of Proudhon, The Poverty of Philosophy. But that was skipped over. What I'm saying in my book is that is the revolutionary essence of Marxism. And why is that? Because if you look at black people as workers and slaves, and you look at white workers as also workers and wage slaves, their slavery is disguised with wages, then the longest struggle against capitalism has been the struggle waged by black people and other people of color in the Americas and Asia and so forth and so on, because that's where capitalism first started laying its foundation. So now it would seem to be an obvious logical conclusion that you're not going to have socialism, you're not going to have anything even approaching that if you completely ignore the colonial question and the national oppression of people of color. It's not going to happen. Now, the Second International, they split with Marx on that. They went into the thing about socialism for white people. They didn't just out and out say that, but here's the way that they framed it. They said that that white workers had to be liberated first, and then black workers would follow. That was just the exact opposite of what Marx had said. Just the exact opposite of the position of the First International. So that once that betrayal of the essence of Marxism took place, it kind of like became the foundation of European chauvinism and revisionism in the Marxist movement. So you can see some beginnings of it with the Paris Commune, but read the book. I can't go into all of that. But it really emerged during the time of the Second International, when the socialists actually took the position that their country first, which meant European countries first, and actually took the position and fought on socialism for white people. That actually happened. And when the Third International came into being, they took issue with that. The manifesto that they issued at their second Congress said explicitly that they were breaking with that tradition. That tradition of European socialism, which said socialism white people, because not only because it was wrong, but also because, well, primarily because it was wrong, but also because it wasn't revolutionary. It was not revolutionary. If you're going to be revolutionary, you got to talk about overthrowing the entire system. You can't just talk about fixing it for your country. What about what's going on in the world? The working class is an international phenomenon. It's not a national phenomenon. It's a multiracial phenomenon. It's not a racial phenomenon. And so you can't liberate part of it without liberating the other part of it. That's what Marxism originally said. And in my opinion, that's the revolutionary essence of it. That's certainly why I'm a Marxist. But now, as far as I'm concerned, the socialists in the Second International totally betrayed that. And that doesn't get brought out and addressed until the Third International emerges. Now, when the Third International emerges, they took a revolutionary position. And their position was that not only workers of the world unite, but workers and oppressed people of the world unite, which meant all of those people in Africa and Asia, mostly whom are non-white, have to be united in order to overthrow imperialism and capitalism. So, having said all of that, we trace the development in terms of policies. So what were the policies of the Communist International? What was the policies of the Communist Party with regard to black people?
And just so we're clear, for those who might not be aware, the Communist International is the coming together of the international ruling governing body of the Communist Party. Is that the
Well, yeah, the Communist International was the coming together of communists all around the world, whether they were ruling or not. But the center of their operations was in those countries where the party had been victorious, like in the Soviet Union and later on in China. That was those were sort of like the revolutionary centers of that period. And so their aim and their objective, it was also a defense mechanism, was to organize workers everywhere, to fight against imperialism. So they were supporting national liberation struggles before they had a name, yeah.
Right on. Yeah, a little bit. Well, not a little bit.
Can I just say one more thing about this?
Absolutely.
Okay. The misconception that I address in the book is that people think that black folks did not see themselves as a nation until the Communist International was formed. In other words, we got word from Russia that we were a nation, and so that's how we got our national consciousness. That's bunk, and I spent a great deal of time in the book showing that Martin Robertson Delaney had this idea long before Lenin about us being a nation, and in fact, that's where Lenin got it from. And he also
got it directly from Delaney.
Well, if you read Martin Robertson Delaney's work, he very definitely and very clearly describes black people as a nation. When I say that's what Lenin,
that I'm clear. I'm sorry. I'm clear that Delaney is a nation with a nation.
I mean, the national consciousness that Robert Delaney is describing among black people. The fact that he's describing black people as a nation and giving scientific and historical evidence for that, it's the same evidence that Lenin looked at.
Yeah, no, I got that. I thought for a second you were saying that Lenin actually referenced Delaney somewhere, which I thought
I didn't
cool.
read that.
I thought that was.
No, I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just saying the idea.
But he could have.
He read a lot.
The point is that not that he did, but the point is that he could have, and that the logic is the same. You're saying he applied
the logic is the same. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that black people developed a national consciousness, due to historical conditions and whatnot that I get into some detail about in the book. That this did not come. Where this idea started, that it came from Russia? It started during the Cold War. It started when the Un-American Activities Committee was calling black people, particularly the black people out of the Deep South, up before them to denounce communism. And they would, and of course, they were portraying black people as being stupid and compliant and so forth and so on. That's why they were communists. And they were saying, well, you got this idea that you are a nation from Russia, which is it's just simply not true.
Right on. That was something I did want to ask you about. Is there any more that you would want to say about the way both black people developed their self-concept as a nation, and how nationhood was and is defined within the communist movement, and then how that played out in terms of your discussion of the colonial versus the color line? Is there any more that you would want to add to what you've said about those differences?
Well, at a certain, and it happened back in the 30s. At a certain level, the international communist movement and the black liberation movement merged, not only in the United States, but in the world. I got a book right here, right now, called Pan-Africanism and Communism, it's by a brother by the name of Hakim Adi, which makes precisely this point. I'm talking about before the liberation movement in South Africa. I'm talking about before the liberation movements in Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, the Congo. I'm talking about back in the 30s when it seemed like Europe had a firm hand in terms of colonialism in Africa and Asia. These movements emerged. We all know about China, and we also know about the United States. Now, the emergence of these movements and how they united and fought together, I think, provides lessons for us. And we were drawing those lessons already all the way up until the 60s and the 70s. You can't name me a liberation movement in Southern Africa that wasn't linked to the socialist movement. Can't name one. You can't name one in West Africa. That was serious, like Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. Sekou Touré, Guinea-Bissau. Amilcar Cabral, Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria, NASA in Egypt. It was a natural development. It was a natural alliance because they were both fighting capitalism, imperialism. And the nationally oppressed people, the colonially oppressed people, had been fighting it longer. And so, it was just a natural coming together. And
yeah, you even point out that you said something to the effect that in pointing out, making this point about nationhood, you point out that the struggle for the black national struggle predates the Bolshevik Revolution and
absolutely,
yeah. So yeah.
Well, not only that, the struggle against capitalism predates the Bolshevik Revolution.
That's the
and
point.
Also
I was right.
predates
That's
the
right.
Paris Commune and
right.
all that. In Brazil in the 17th century, I believe it was, there emerged a state called Quilombo. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? It was led by an African woman named Palmares, and they revolted against the Portuguese and went into the hills and founded this community called Quilombo, which in Portuguese means free community.
It's a great movie too, by the way.
That community still exists.
Mm-hmm.
They're still fighting for statehood. Mm-hmm. They're still fighting for their national independence to this day. So that's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's the anomaly that nobody wants to address called Haiti. Mm-hmm. Haiti happened during the French Revolution, and so, you got that. And then you got something that I talk about in my book that I don't think you'll read it in any other book. The Paris Commune and Black Reconstruction. They occurred at the same time in history.
And why is that relevant?
That is relevant because it both involved workers. And they were both challenging in different ways capitalism. The Paris Commune, they were challenging it from the standpoint of industrialized workers. They were trying to overthrow capitalism insofar as industrialized capitalism goes. The black folks in the South had gained their freedom or won their freedom by their own effort, mostly through the Civil War. And in the early stages of that, I say from 1871 to 1877, that was actually a revolutionary period. So both revolutionary periods, but of a different sort. The one in the South was about it was sort of like a bourgeois revolution to bring the benefits of bourgeois society to people who had been enslaved for 250 years. The right to vote, the right to have property, those sorts of things. And that lasted for almost 10 years. The one in Paris lasted for a couple of months, maybe 8 weeks. And And the methods by which they were put down were also similar. They murdered a lot of people in the Paris Commune for having the audacity to try to overthrow capitalism. But that massacre lasted. I'm not trying to minimize the massacre. It just lasted for a short period of time. Maybe a week. The massacres in the South are still going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying in my book that Black Reconstruction, as W.B. Du Bois called it, is the unfinished revolution in America. We never finished that. We never got those fundamental rights that we were fighting for back then. Voting rights is still an issue. All of the problems that we had then in terms of us as a people, us as an oppressed nation, we still got now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to finish that revolution in order to get to socialism. Except today, I think it's a different proposition. I don't think we can. I don't think it's two separate roads we're going down here. I think it's the same road. I think the road of Black liberation is fundamentally also the road to socialism. Because I don't think you can have Black liberation without overthrowing capitalism. Don't think it's possible.
Sounds about right, for sure. Towards the end of at the end of the book, in the epilogue, you talk about you make a reference to Du Bois talking about something. At some point, you say something like the end of enslavement was. Were you saying during the Civil War? Was it the end of enslavement proper, so to speak? That is, that this was the first general strike. That the enslaved leaving the plantation was the first big. That Du Bois is pointing out the first general strike. And I'm wondering if you weren't just pointing to this as an important point in history, but as something prescriptive going forward. In other words, should there be another, or would it be effective at this point for there to be another general strike? Or what methods do you think going forward do you think should be engaged, or do you think your book encourages that be engaged to get us to socialism?
Well, I think as we fight, we learn the efficiency and deficiency of different methods. But the most revolutionary method that workers have is to withdraw their labor. Black people have a strategic position in this society with regard to work, just like they did during the time of slavery. Well, it's of course it's different because now we're talking about industries and so forth and so on. But the methods of struggle have to persist because the oppression persists. We can never give up the strike as a weapon. That's a most precious weapon to working people, and especially to Black working people, but all working people. And we have to use it in order to advance our struggle. Our class enemies, they go all out to break a strike because they know that a strike stops industry. The thing that happened during the Civil War, of course, with the general strike I'm talking about during the Civil War, they couldn't break that because the whole system had shut down for a second. But yeah, I mean, when we take a deep look at what our people did during that period, they didn't only withhold their labor, they also burned down and tore down those slave pens. They destroyed the slave patrols. They did all of that, because these were the instruments of oppression that had been used against them, and they knew that they had to get rid of them.
So you're saying that's
they shot their best stick.
That was the origins of a more militant version of defund the police.
Well, you can say that.
Listen,
I mean,
yeah. Mhm.
we're coming into revolutionary times again. This ain't 1861. This is 2021.
Mhm.
But what happened in 2020 lets me know that this unfinished revolution is going to have to be had,
Mm.
because anytime you have 26 million people in a black-led rebellion in all 50 states of this country,
Mm.
that is a historical turning point, and we're definitely seeing some of the results of that. But this means that we have to be preparing ourselves to meet the challenges ahead.
Mm.
You know, we got to be getting organized to not only defund the police, but also to oppose all those institutions that hold us in bondage.
So listen, I have just really just one more official question, and then we can check the comments and chats if you have time to see if there are others you want to respond to. But my colleague here, Dr. Sharice Burden-Stelly, talks a lot about intellectual McCarthyism, and she's talked about it specifically in relationship to Black Studies movement. And I know one of the purposes that I have in mind for this discussion is for my my intro to Black Studies class. And so I was wondering if I could get you to talk a little bit about this intellectual McCarthyism, specifically as it relates to Black history, because I think your book is a response to that. That is the removal from or the suppression within Black studies and Black history of the relationship of between socialism and the Black liberation struggle. So if you could say a word or two maybe about that, or maybe just highlight some of the figures for a second that you talk about in the book, Cyril Briggs, for instance, obviously, and others, just as a reminder of the relationship that you're talking about here between, again, Black liberation and socialism, which I've often found is a suppressed, a discouraged component of that history, even within Black studies.
Yeah. Well, first of all, once you refuse to recognize that the Black liberation movement is a revolutionary movement in and of itself, part of and that its natural ally is that other revolutionary movement called socialism, uh, then you have to make sure that the two never meet. You have to make sure that there's no coming together here. And the ruling class is not like class consciousness. They have that. We do. And so what they see as their job is to disarm us ideologically and organizationally, and that's what anti-communism does in our movement. It's like I once read a passage in Oliver C. Cox where he said that the Southern racist fascists used to tell Black people, stay away from communists because they're preaching equality. They and he said that as soon as Black people got out of their company, they would say, "We better go find them."
Yeah. I know that's right.
So this is the bottom line here. They don't want us to become more conscious and determined revolutionaries, so they try to keep us separated from our natural allies. And I haven't really done a lot of reading up on this intellectual McCarthyism, but McCarthyism was driven by anti-communism, and I guess what they're talking about is that they're trying to turn us against against communists, and denying the role of communists, denying the role of communists in the Black liberation movement. I don't mention Paul Robeson in my book per se, but I'm doing the second volume. He will be mentioned in that volume.
So talk. If you say a few words about those you do mention in this first.
Well, Cyril Briggs, yeah. Cyril Briggs came into the communist movement on his own, and he was very definitely a nationalist, you know, but he saw what we're talking about here. He saw the natural alliance between class conscious white workers and black and black workers and black people, and that's what he fought for. And he was a part of Harlem Renaissance and whatnot. In the And then there was also Hubert Harrison. There was also Claude McKay, who a lot of people know about because he's that famous poet who wrote that famous poem about fighting back during the
If We Must Die.
If We Must Die during the 1919 race riots. So you know these comrades, these brothers and sisters, they were very very radical. You know, and some of them were openly communists. You know, and they are part of our revolutionary tradition. And the history books, so a lot of the stuff that comes out of academia just doesn't recognize that. They don't. They just ignore it. They don't talk about that part of our history. And I've already said why I think the reason for that is. But Cyril Briggs and Hubert Harrison, Grace Campbell, you know, the African Blood Brotherhood, you know, which was the first group of black people to join the communist movement. They started a relationship between the communist movement and the Black Nationalist movement, which a lot of people don't appreciate. You know, some of them wrote for the Negro World, which was the Marcus Garvey's newspaper. You know, I think Hubert Harrison had an editorial position in it. And if you go on down into the 50s, you had Reds also being the editor of the Mohammed Speaks. You want me to name them?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Joe Walker, you know,
now that's interesting. I got to learn more about that.
Well, you know, Dick Durham. I mean, Richard Durham, right here in Chicago. I worked with his wife, his widow, for years. He was an editor of Mohammed Speaks. You know, and there was also one whose name I'm not pulling up right now, out of Detroit, who was these guys were communists. They weren't want to be communists, could be communists. They were communists, you know, and they worked for the Mohammed, and the Mohammed Speaks was all right with it because they supported the national question. That's what that was.
Right so, on. And one would think that even if you get the nation you want, once that issue was dealt with, you still got to deal with how the wealth in that nation is distributed. So I would think you would want it to be socialist or communist itself anyway. So anyway,
exactly. And when you look at the composition of the nation, we're talking about the black nation is 90-some% working class. So how are you going to avoid that question?
I was going to say 90 sounds low. That percentage sounds low.
Well, 99.9.
Yeah, I was going to say, really, you know.
99.9. So we can include you.
Yeah, I mean, really. Listen, yeah, exactly, really. I wonder what Chapman's perspective is on Maoism, which should be argued as the highest theory of Marxism. It is Marxism for today's conditions. What do you think about that?
Well, I think Mao Zedong, you know, played a constructive role in the development of Marxism-Leninism, and I think you know, that's indisputable, particularly during the period of the Chinese Revolution. You know, but I'm not a Maoist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist.
Okay. Let's see. Any particular reason? I mean, is there anything more you would say? Like, what prevents you from being like? What did Mao not get, or what is? Or are you just saying he didn't? There's no need to expand beyond Marxist-Leninism.
Well, I think his political contributions and his philosophical contributions are tremendous, and I study them, I appreciate them, and I try to use them. You know, I also think he made some mistakes, and um, but I don't want to get into that debate.
Okay.
Because the Chinese people are dealing with this. They're dealing with Maoism, and I don't want to get into that. But I'm I'm not opposed to the work and the contributions that Mao Zedong made to our movement.
Okay, right on. Listen, I don't. I think I've gone through my set of questions. I think I've gotten to those in the chat. There's just a vigorous conversation going on. So let me just ask you, Frank Chapman, if there's anything else you'd like to say that I haven't invited you to, or if there's any point you would want to make or have us get to that from your book that I didn't invite you to, or anything else at all.
I think you were pretty thorough. The next thing is for people to read the book.
Well, right on. And to that end, we will remind them once again that the book is titled, I wanted to, let me see if I can get
Marxist-Leninist Perspectives.
Yep. No, I was just trying to get this thing set up so I could show it real quick. Forgive. There we go. And there it is. So folks can Marxist-Leninist Perspectives on Black Liberation and Socialism by Frank Chapman. Please do get your copy, and then I hope you'd be willing to come back again and discuss some more with us as I and more of us get through all of the rest of it, and just want to invite you back for more discussion. And I hope you'd be willing to come back. I thoroughly enjoyed this discussion and what I've read so far. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you too, brother. Thank you.
All right. Anytime. All right. Well, Frank Chapman, take care of yourself, man. Be safe, and we'll look to catch you again in this whirlwind. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. That was Brother Frank Chapman. A very again, I haven't gotten through the entire book yet, but it's a fascinating read so far. I think the questions he raises around Cedric Robinson, around the relationship, just broadly speaking, between socialism and Black liberation are fascinating. The historical development of the national question. I have to say, selfishly, since we're going to be talking about, I'm trying to find the right time, but in the next few days, we're going to be having the 10th anniversary sort of live stream celebration of I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto, my first book. And we're going to talk about all of its, how it got developed and all of its flaws and all of the hopes I had for it and all of, the good stuff that's in it. One of which that Brother Chapman confirms for me yet again, which is great. Not that was his intent or the goal or certainly the purpose of his book, but I was in I Mix What I Like. I was trying to make the same sort of argument that the one of the reasons I was concluding then and still do that on the internal colonial relationship that Black people have was developing on the as Brother Chapman pointed out, the work of people like Delaney and I point to David Walker and others long before folks whose work I appreciate, long before the Bolshevik Revolution, long before Marx, long before Engels, certainly long before Lenin, and then again, of course, the Bolshevik Revolution, long before Stalin and the Comintern and all of that were Black people figuring out the nationhood question, the redistributionist question, the civilizational question, the anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-white supremacist, anti-imperial question. All of this was being dealt with. Absolutely, David Walker's Appeal is an absolute must read. and particularly one of the newer editions that have the intro from Dr. James Turner is probably the one you want to get. But so anyway, yeah, that when we're talking about for my class, Intro to Black Studies, or we're just broadly speaking, that to me was a very important point. So when I saw in Frank Chapman's new book that he makes that point, I was like, yeah, okay, good, because anyway. So I'm happy. So anyway, we'll talk more about that as well. So stick around, stay in touch with the Black Power Media channel. Make sure you've liked, shared, and subscribed. Not everybody still watching has liked it for some reason. So go ahead and hit the like button. Share this video, seeing it now or in a future replay. Join the channel and help us continue to expand. And then come on back and make sure you don't miss any of the things coming up this week. Some planned, some not planned. Of course, at the end of the week is Luke Ma Nation and The Last Dope Intellectual. Renegade Culture is going to be coming back. I don't know what their new set schedule is. I'm going to be getting a new set schedule at some point. And then, of course, all of that, for me at least, is being built around the coming Remix morning show program. So we can starting the day, all of our days, with these kinds of conversation and analysis of the daily news from these kinds of perspectives. So I'm very excited about that. So your support helps us get there. As always, again, I'm trying to be the Pierre of Black radical politics. So make sure if you got anything to say, that
put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like Live at the Black Power Media channel. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Catch you next time. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.